Well, let me thank you, Kelsey. Great to have you as a constituent, and thank all of the patriots who are on this call. I just want to salute all of you at Move On for meeting this moment and recognizing that we do face a clear and present danger to our democracy, to our country, and of course, to the Constitution and the rights of due process. Just a little earlier today, I met with Kilmar's family. I met with his wife, Jennifer, with his mother, Cecilia, with his brother, Cesar, and with the three children of Jennifer and Kilmar. And it was my first time to give them a full report about my meeting with Kilmar. I called his wife, Jennifer, right away after I met, but this was my opportunity to give them a full report. And we also discussed the fact that you all were just talking about, which is that this case is not about one man alone. It's about all of us. It's about our Constitution. It's about our right to due process, because if you deny one person their constitutional rights, you threaten them for every other person who resides in the United States of America. And that is why this is such a critical moment, because the Trump administration, as you know, admitted in federal court, right? They admitted in federal court that they had wrongfully seized and abducted Abrego Garcia. They took him off the streets of Maryland. They sent him first to Baltimore, probably the Baltimore Detention Center. He asked to make a phone call to let people know where he was and what was happening. They denied him that opportunity. They then flew him to Texas. They then put him on a plane where he was handcuffed and shackled, and he couldn't see out the windows. He was with other prisoners. And next thing they know, they land in El Salvador and they're taken to this notorious prison, CICOT. That should not happen in the United States of America. And instead of addressing this and doing what the Supreme Court said on a 9-0 decision and facilitating his return, the Trump administration, as we speak, is flouting that court order. And when they flout a court order in one case, it means that they're thumbing their nose at our entire Constitution and shredding rights for everybody who resides in America. And that is why this is such a critical moment for all of us to stand up. When I met with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, I first of all conveyed the love from his family and how worried they were. And here he was, locked away himself. And he said what he worried about most was his family, including his 5-year-old son who has autism. His son was in the car when federal agents pulled him over and handcuffed Mr. Abrego Garcia and essentially whisked him away in this illegal scheme. So he wanted his family to know how much he loved them and also how they gave him the strength to continue day to day. And that's what I conveyed again to his family when I met with them this afternoon. We also, of course, discussed the need to keep the pressure on the Trump administration and also the government of El Salvador. So the Trump administration clearly is violating this court order. It's going to be very important that the federal courts hold the Trump officials in contempt for ignoring the court order. And we know that the Trump administration plans to give El Salvador about $15 million to illegally whisk people like Kilmar out of the country and put them in this prison. And so we need to make sure that the Congress, whenever the Trump administration submits its budget for the coming year, that not one dime, not one penny of U.S. taxpayer money goes to the government of El Salvador, so long as they are complicit in this illegal Trump scheme. And they are complicit. President Bukele is all part of this scheme. You all probably saw that meeting at the White House, the notorious meeting at the White House. I met with the vice president of El Salvador on the morning that I arrived, and I asked for a couple things. Number one, I asked for them to release Abrego Garcia because he was illegally detained. I asked, do you have any evidence that he's committed a crime? And they said, no. I said, why are you holding him? And the answer was pretty much that they're being paid by the United States to hold him. So the notion that the United States can't facilitate his return, at the very least by stop paying them to keep him, is obvious. I asked the government of El Salvador just to open the gates because, as you probably heard Bukele say, well, we can't smuggle this man into the United States. I said, I'm not asking you to smuggle him into the United States. I'm just asking you to open the door to the prison and let him go. And Attorney General Bondi at one point said that we'd send a plane. They probably withdrew that idea. But the reality is that we need to keep the pressure on the government of El Salvador as well. And there are a number of things that we can do. And I've talked to authorities in the state of Maryland about this. Number one, states can review their pension investments to determine whether they are invested in companies that are doing business in El Salvador and say, we're not going to invest state pension funds there so long as you are illegally holding this individual who the U.S. courts has said need to be returned to the United States for due process. Also, I would say that, Americans should pick another tourist destination for a while until the government of El Salvador ends this sort of complicit illegal scheme. So there are lots of things that we need to do to also try to hold Bukele accountable. The other thing I asked the vice president when I met that morning that I arrived was to be able to meet with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. The answer was no. I said, well, if I come back next week, can I see him? Because they suggested that, well, I couldn't see him on this visit because they didn't have enough planning time. So I said, can I come back next week and see him? No. Can I call him? Nope. Can his wife call him? Nope. So that's why the next day, got in a car and headed toward Sikot, the notorious prison where about 3 kilometers out, soldiers, pulled me over to the side of the road and said, you can't proceed any further. And I asked, why not? And their answer was they'd been ordered to prevent me from going. But I will say we made a lot of noise in El Salvador, had a lot of local press conferences and pointed out that El Salvador, the government of El Salvador, was violating international law by preventing anybody from seeing Mr. Abrego Garcia. That is a blatant violation of international law. And so as I was planning to depart that evening, I got a call and they relented. And so I got to meet with him and tell him his family was thinking of him and report back and other details that I've reported on. But just to give you an idea of the amount of deception involved in all of this, I don't know if you've heard of what I call Margarita Gate, which is that when I first sat down with Kilmar, we just had our glasses of water and some coffee on there. But as we were meeting, we learned that the government officials instructed the waiters to bring and set down 2 glasses on the table that looked kind of like margaritas. They were tall glasses. They had little cherries. They had either sugar or salt on the rim, and that was all designed to make it look like Abrego Garcia was somehow in paradise, even though he'd been locked up in the most notorious prison in Latin America. And they forgot to do one thing. And so there was a telltale sign, if you're a Sherlock Holmes fan, which is that if you look at the salt and sugar around the rim on our glasses, there was no gap. So nobody took a sip. But the point of this story is the extent to which both President Bukele and Donald Trump will go to deceive people in the United States of America and in El Salvador. So that's what we're up against. We need to fight back with everything we've got. I want to thank all of you who are part of Move On for doing that. We need to fight back in the courts. We need to fight back in Congress. We need to fight back in communities all over America, as you've been doing, because, again, I will close with the point that this is not about one man alone. Defending his rights are necessary to defend the rights of everybody who resides in the United States of America. And if we allow the Trump administration to take away those rights and trample over those rights, then we are all in great danger. I want to address one other thing, which is the Trump administration's efforts to entirely change the story, right? They don't want to talk about the fact they admitted this person was illegally abducted. They want to talk about everything else, including gangs and MS-13. And I just want to be really clear. I've actually been fighting MS-13 for over 20 years, longer than Donald Trump probably ever heard of MS-13, certainly uttered those words. But the idea that you can't fight MS-13 and other gangs and at the same time uphold the Constitution is a very dangerous idea. The other point I want to make, and I've said to Donald Trump and all of his cronies, stop tweeting about this and put up or shut up in court. Because here's what the federal district court judge in this case said, and I am quoting, that the Trump administration has presented no evidence linking Abrego Garcia to MS-13 or to any terrorist activity, unquote. So all of that is the side story that the Trump administration wants people to chase after and not focus on the main story, which is are there gross violations of the Constitution and due process rights. That is what is at stake right now. And so all of us need to do what you're doing and move on, which is letting the country know what's happening and then also taking important action. So I look forward to continuing to work with you to take action, because action will be required to protect our Constitution and to save our country. And I want to thank all of you for being part of this very important fight. Those of us who love our country, this is the moment each of us has to stand up. This is a moment for patriots. Thank all of you for being patriots.